But today we are looking at how can I have peace under pressure. And recently I was reading Enid Blyton's children's book, The Land of Far Beyond, to my kids. I don't know if has anyone come across that book. Yes, I introduced some people to it. It's actually based on Pilgrim's Progress. Now you probably have heard of that book. And it's an allegory of life. And she tells a story of a troop of adults and children who find themselves weighed down by heavy burdens. Actually, burdens that they didn't know they even had in the first place. And when they become aware of their burdens, they go on a journey to find the land of far beyond, where they're told their burdens will be released. But along the way, they have to face different challenges, as we all must do in life. And one such challenge is when they come to the house of peace, where contentment lives. And they come to this house to find that it's heavily guarded by some pretty serious looking soldiers. And they watch on in terror as two riders on horseback attempt to pass the guards to enter the house of peace. And these guards pull out their swords and they begin to slash at these riders. And it's pretty horrific as they watch on. And you can imagine as they're looking at this little group cowers in fear. How could they possibly enter the house of peace when such mighty soldiers are forcefully guarding it? Now, what they don't realize is that the two riders who are trying to pass are called strife and discontent. And that the guards are actually vigilantly protecting the house of peace from such things entering in. And thankfully they come to understand it and they pass through to enter the house of peace, and there they meet contentment. But one of the things I found really interesting was the way that Blyton depicts strife and discontent. She depicts them as these violent, forceful riders who are racing at the guards at full speed, intent on getting past their defenses and wreaking havoc in this tranquil place. And it occurs to me that's a really good analogy for our inner life. That there are things that will almost violently try to get past our defenses and seek to cause strife and discontent and unrest within us. And so I wonder, as you sit here today, what might that be for you? Is there something in your life right now that is troubling your heart, that is disrupting your sense of contentment? Is there something going on in your own inner life where you feel strife and discontentment are wreaking havoc in there? You wouldn't be alone. I think we all struggle with that, because the reality is that we live in a very demanding world. In fact, life in our modern world only amplifies the external pressures that are coming at us all the time. And one of the things I often think about is that we live in this incredible time within history where we have incredible access to resources and technology that's designed to make life easier. But the fact is it's only served to increase the pressure that we feel. So life feels more demanding, it feels more frantic and more exhausting. And I'll give you an example of this. If you take your smartphone out for a moment, have a look at it. Take this as an example. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And it is a supercomputer in your hands, designed to help you. Yet because it's always on and it's always on you, it has quietly reshaped your life. It has taken on an omnipresent quality within your life, a godlike presence in your life. And I'll give you a few examples of how it's begun to reshape us. First of all, it increases the demands upon us. So people expect more from us, and we expect more from ourselves. Communication is instant, so responses are expected immediately. Work is expected to move faster because technology is faster. Add to that the constant comparison with the carefully curated lives we see on social media, and this pressure coming at us only multiplies. The other thing that it does is it blurs the boundaries in our lives. So work and personal life now bleed into each other. Notifications interrupt our peace and fragment our attention. Mentally, we are trying to navigate being in several places at once, responding to a work email, feeding the kids, and scrolling through the world news. And much of that news is heavy. Crisis after crisis, often with no resolution. And so our minds were never designed to be dispersed in so many directions, let alone carry the weight of the entire world's problems all at once. The final thing that it does is it actually weakens our support systems. So the nature of our fast-paced lives means that we often choose broad networks over deep relationships, connection over conversation, and messages over face-to-face presence. And as a result, we feel more isolated and less supported. That's just one example of how modern life amplifies pressure faster than our inner capacity can keep up with. Which is why it's no surprise that burnout has become far more common than it once was. Research that was just released at the end of last year in the UK shows that nearly 2/5 of workers report feeling burnt out. And 1 in 3 experience it severely enough to take time off work. You know, another report that I read was particularly mothers felt burnt out, the demands upon them. And that means that a number of you in this room are either on the verge of burnout or you are feeling its effects. You feel soul weary. You feel tired. You feel like you're up to here, and if there was one more thing that would happen to you, it's going to push you over the edge. You know, life feels unrelenting because in many ways it is. We are exposed to more of the world's uncertainty. We carry more than we were designed to carry, and we expect more from ourselves than ever before. And the result is that our inner life is increasingly being depleted and depleted and depleted. But it raises an important question for us. Why? Why are we living like this? What's really going on beneath the surface of our lives? Well, I want to suggest that beneath the challenges and the demands of modern life, there's another kind of pressure that is much more threatening to our sense of contentment and well-being. And the Bible speaks about our inner life using the language of the heart. And when the Bible talks about our heart, it's not referring to just our emotions, it's speaking about the center of the self, the place where our thoughts, our feelings, our desires, our hopes, our fears, and ultimately our will all come together. And according to the Bible, the heart is the most important part of us because whatever rules there will shape everything else. So whatever happens at the heart level determines how we interpret life, how we make decisions, what we prioritize, and what we value. And as a result, it also determines how we experience whatever is going on externally around us. External situations might be pressing in on us. They might be incredibly challenging and demanding, but it's the condition of the heart that determines how those pressures affect our state of being. This means that the greatest threat to what we might call peace or rest or contentment is not as much our external situations as it is about the fears that those situations awaken within us. When life becomes demanding, it has a way of exposing what's really going on in our heart, what we're really afraid of. And I want to share with you at least 2 deep fears that commonly disturb our inner life. There are more than this, of course, but let me just share with you this morning at least 2. The first is the fear of disappointing others, and the second is the fear of disappointing ourselves. It is really sobering to realize how much of what we do is shaped by a desire for approval, or if you flip that, shaped by the fear of rejection. Most of us are far more influenced by what others think of us than we care to admit. And this becomes especially problematic when we are surrounded by multiple, often competing expectations from employers, family members, friends, ourselves, and yes, even other Christians. And in such a world, it's inevitable that someone will be disappointed disappointed. You cannot meet everyone's expectations everywhere all the time. And so the real challenge is not whether people will be unhappy with you, but whether you will be able to cope with people being unhappy with you, even when you've genuinely done your best. Will you existentially be able to cope with that? There is a modern proverb that captures this tendency well. It says, we spend money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people who don't care. And one of the things I love about Simon is he often says to our kids this line, and I hope it's something that they remember, which is like, don't worry about what other people think of you, because they're not thinking about you at all. They're thinking about what other people think of them. And it's so true, isn't it? We spend money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people who don't really care. And it's humorous, but it's true. We often pour our limited resources, our time, our energy, our money, we spread ourselves too thinly into pursuits that are not that important, driven by a quiet fear of how we will be perceived. And over time, our once healthy, our good ambitions, our healthy hopes are subtly hijacked by our need for approval. And what makes this even more complex is that many of the expectations that we feel crushed by may never have been clearly stated or may not even exist at all. But because we fear disappointing others, we avoid the hard conversations that would bring clarity. Instead, we overcommit. We say yes when wisdom would say no. Anxiety grows. Resentment quietly sets in, often toward the very people we're trying to please. And here's the real problem. If we hang our worth on keeping everyone in our lives happy, we will never be at ease within ourselves. In fact, we will find ourselves increasingly crushed by the weight of other people's expectations, and the fear of disappointing others will become an enemy to peace in our inner life. But for many of us, the greater threat to our inner stillness or contentment is not so much the weight of other people's expectations as the weight of our own. For some of us, the deeper fear is not so much about disappointing others as it is about disappointing ourselves. And this is essentially the fear of failure and being exposed as incompetent, insignificant, ordinary, or irrelevant. Arthur Brooks, a professor at Harvard who's a best-selling author and self-confessed overachiever, notes that this fear often shows up among overachievers and high performers as they hang their sense of worth and value on their competence, on their achievements, and their success. And the problem here is not ambition so much as it is about identity. Because when your sense of self is fused with what you can do well, then failure no longer feels like an event. It feels like a judgment on who you are. A mistake doesn't simply mean I failed at something. It equates to I am the failure. And as Arthur Brooks writes, if your happiness depends on success, then every failure or even the threat of failure becomes a crisis. And this is why overachievers often struggle so deeply with the fear of failure. Success becomes not just something they pursue, but something they need in order to feel okay about themselves. It's not the fear of disappointing others that's driving them, but the fear that maybe I'm not competent. Maybe I'm not special. Maybe I'm not significant. And so achievement becomes a means to quietening those fears, which is why this fear actually leads to relentless striving. The heart is never at ease because it's always asking whether today's performance will be enough to justify tomorrow's sense of worth. Two deep underlying fears that threaten our ability to find peace under pressure: the fear of disappointing others and the fear of disappointing ourselves. Think for a moment about your inner life right now. In light of the external challenges, the demands, the stresses you're navigating in life, what's going on inside of you in response to those? Do you see the fear of disappointing people driving you in unhealthy ways? What about the fear of failure? Well, if you're not sure, have a think about the following questions. I'm going to ask you some questions. To what extent would these questions describe you at the moment? Do you find yourself saying yes when you would prefer to say no? Or do you have to write a really long-winded excuse as to why you need to say no to somebody in your text message? Do you tend not to speak up to your boss or colleagues, to a spouse or a friend to avoid their disapproval? Are you having a hard time laughing at your shortcomings or failures, or even admitting them? Do you find yourself leading with your resume when you meet new people or are in certain circles? Or perhaps you do the opposite of that. You self-deprecate. You say, I'm only this. Do you struggle to take risks because you could fail or look foolish? Do you act like a different person in different situations with different people? So you're one person on a Sunday, but the rest of the week, you're a different person. If you answered yes to any of those questions, I want to tell you there is some kind of fear going on beneath the surface. But I want to reassure you, you stand in good company. You're not the only one. In fact, I would be more concerned if you didn't respond yes in any way. I think there's some deeper problems going on there that we'd need to talk about. Yeah, like delusion, yeah. All of us have fear of some kind poking around, whether we care to admit it or not. The fear of disappointing others or the fear of disappointing ourselves. But the interesting thing is, if you listen carefully, both of these fears are actually asking the same question, just in a different way. And it's the question, am I enough? One fear looks outward and it asks, will you accept me if I let you down? The other looks inward and asks, can I still accept myself if I fail? But underneath both is a deeper assumption that it's all on me to improve my value in the world. Whether I derive that value from how others approve of me or from my own sense of accomplishment, it's still all on me to prove my worth, to make myself good enough. And that, friends, is a heavy burden to bear. It's a soul-depleting burden to bear, and one that you were never intended to carry. And one of the most life-changing invitations that Jesus Christ extended to us was this: come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. His wonderful invitation, which he makes possible through his life, death, and resurrection, is for us to come to him with the fears that burden us and receive from him what we ultimately need. And what is it that we receive? Well, first, we do receive unconditional acceptance. There is nothing to prove and nothing to lose with him. Your value is not negotiated through performance. It's declared by his acceptance of you. And it's not dependent on what you accomplish, but on what Christ has accomplished for you. And the Bible calls this grace. And grace is so lavish and so radical that it's unearned and it's undeserved and it's freely given. And because of it, you can rest. You can rest in the knowledge that you are loved without fear of rejection or disapproval. And you can begin to live with a quiet confidence, not because life is easy, but because you're secure. You see, when someone knows that they are deeply loved, it changes how they live. They are less anxious, less driven by fear, and more able to take risks, to be honest and to be brave. They don't have to constantly prove themselves because their worth is no longer in question. And the cross of Jesus Christ offers us that kind of security. We celebrated Easter last week, the death and resurrection of Jesus. And the cross speaks to this kind of security only more deeply and more permanently than anything else ever could. Because the cross of Christ declares once and for all, authoritatively, resoundingly throughout all of history, that you are valuable to God. That he loves you and he wants you. Full stop, no question mark. Are you valuable? Yes, Jesus says. That question has been answered by his death on the cross. And from that secure position, that is where you live from. That is what releases you to live differently in the world, which is the second aspect of Jesus' invitation to us. It's an invitation to a different way of living in this world, a new way of operating, a way of operating that is sustained by God himself. For Jesus not only says, "Come to me," he also says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Life here and now is no longer all on you to work out. The weight of the outcomes of your life is not all on you. You can do your best in life and still be okay, even if others aren't happy with you or the outcomes didn't turn out the way you hoped or planned, because you are not navigating life alone, but with the God of the universe who knows what you are made for and is carrying the outcomes of your life. So life with Jesus involves a new operating system, not one driven by fear, but grounded in grace. And of course, Jesus doesn't promise a pressure-free or trouble-free life, but he does offer a new center of gravity for the soul. A life that's no longer organized around proving or pleasing or securing worth, but around a daily relationship with him that always starts with us hearing his voice over us that says, "To me, you are enough. And with me, you have everything you need." I want you to turn for a moment to the person next to you, and I want you to speak Jesus' words over them and say, "You are enough. And with Jesus, you have more than you need." I wonder what it's like to hear those words. What's it like to hear that you are enough? And with Jesus, you have everything you need. You know, there's some of the most liberating words you could ever hear. The most liberating words you could ever take to heart. They're the most life-transforming words. Because to those who are afraid of disappointing others, Jesus turns to you and he says, "You are already fully known and you're fully loved. The approval you most deeply craved is not something you earn through performance. It is something you receive by grace. You don't have to impress me. Just come to me." And the reality is when Jesus becomes your primary audience, you know what happens is the power of every other audience is relativized. People might still be disappointed, but what they think of you no longer defines you or cripples you. And to those of us who are afraid of disappointing ourselves, we're afraid of failure, Jesus says your worth was never grounded in your competence to begin with. Failure might still be painful, but it's no longer devastating. And it can no longer pronounce a final judgment on who you are, because your identity rests not on what you achieve, but on what I have achieved for you. So I wonder, what would change for you if you lived as though you had nothing to prove? What would you do differently tomorrow or the next day? How would you live differently if you had nothing to prove? I do believe that in order for us to have real peace, we have to come to grips with our own fear. We have to face our own fears in our own hearts. And we can find temporary relief through different stress-relieving techniques, and they can be helpful. But until you deal with these real fears that are burdening your soul, you won't ever truly step into the kind of rest that Jesus is inviting you into. So I want to just stop and just pray for us now, and then we'll enter into a time of Q&A. But I do just want to pray that we might experience something of rest, his rest. So let me just pray for you. Lord, I just want to ask that for every person here this morning, and I don't know their story and I don't know what they've come with today, but I do know you, Lord. And I do know that your invitation is for every single person in this room. When you say, come to me, all you who feel weary, all you who are burdened by trying to make life work and trying to be good enough and trying to meet everyone's expectations all the time. Come to me, and I will give you rest. rest. And learn from me. Let me show you how to live. Because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So come to me. And so I pray for any of you today, perhaps you've been resisting coming to Jesus with what's troubling your soul. I pray that you would open up your heart to him today and say, Lord, there is this fear beneath all the other fears that I'm really struggling with. And I pray that you would bring that fear to him and you would hear him say, it's okay, let's navigate this together. And so I pray that in your name. Amen.